I'm ashamed of those columns that I wrote. When I read them today, I'm embarrassed by them.
Tonight, a controversial Winnipeg columnist apologizes for his past work and explains why he wrote his new book.
They are building equity in their families. They have a safe place for their kids.
How the Manitoba Métis Federation has helped improve the lives for many Métis people in the province. And Studis Skoden. After 3 seasons, the hit series Reservation Dogs is finally getting an Emmy nod. Good evening, I'm Krisan Achkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. Manitoba RCMP have released details about the arrest of an ex-priest for a historical sexual assault. On June 13th, Russell RCMP arrested 81-year-old Constantine Turcoing of Regina, Saskatchewan in relation to a sexual assault dating back to the early 1970s when he was a priest at a church in Leonard, Manitoba, roughly 4 hours northwest of Winnipeg. Russell RCMP received a report of a historical sexual assault on March 16, 2022. A female in her 60s reported that she had been sexually assaulted multiple times over the course of 2 years by the priest when she was a parishioner at St. Elijah Romanian Orthodox Church. At the time of the assaults, the survivor was 11 to 12 years old. Police do believe there are further survivors and ask them to call the Russell RCMP detachment. An inquest report into the deaths of 2 Indigenous men at the hands of the Winnipeg Police Service has now been released to the public. 23-year-old Adrian Lequette and 33-year-old Evan Karen were shot by police just 10 days apart in September of 2017. Police located Lequette after an assault, robbery, and car theft. When he pointed a gun at officers, they fatally shot him. Karen was shot during a homicide in progress. When he attempted to thrust a blade at an officer's head, they shot him 6 times. An expert on police training stated the officer's use of force was justified in both cases. During the inquest, both families sought legal counsel but were unsuccessful. The report's author, Judge Robert Heinrichs, recommended that families be given lawyers for future inquests. 2 First Nations in northwestern Ontario this week say they are ending their association with the Treaty 3 Police Service. The police service and its board met on Tuesday to discuss the situation and say they take the First Nations concerns very seriously and says services have been impacted by a lack of resources provided by the First Nations and the Inuit policing program, which is currently the subject of a human rights complaint. Treaty 3 Police says it is taking a number of immediate steps to address the concerns. Wabaseemoong, Independent Nations, and Grassy Narrows said the Treaty 3 Police Service has provided what it calls insufficient and ineffective policing that has led to an increase in violence, drug use, and deaths. The First Nations contracts with the police service will be terminated in 100 days, and a community-governed police service will take its place. The Treaty 3 Police Service provides policing duties for 23 communities in Treaty 3 territory. In a statement, Ontario NDP MPP Saul Mamakwa said First Nations police services are constantly fighting an uphill battle against addiction-related violence and deaths due to insufficient resources. It's time that changed. Our nations deserve to be safe and supported, and First Nations police deserve serious investments from the Canadian and provincial governments so they can protect our communities. More than 7,200 people from First Nations across Canada are currently evacuated due to wildfires. That includes 6 First Nations in Manitoba, where evacuees have been spread out across the province. Marcel Colomb First Nation, 1,000 kilometers north of Winnipeg, has been completely evacuated, where 2 wildfires are both less than 10 kilometers from the community. Manitoba Wildfire Service says value protection has been set up on 30 structures in and around the community. Earlier today, the Canadian Red Cross said it was supporting the evacuation of people with the greatest health concerns from St. Teresa Point First Nation. According to the latest update from the province of Manitoba, some residents of God's Lake First Nation, Manto Sipi Cree Nation, Wasagamak First Nation, and Red Sucker Lake First Nation have been evacuated due to smoke in the area. Manitoba Wildfire Services says it's focused on protecting Manitoba hydro infrastructure and the Bell Communication Tower, which services the Island Lake area. There are currently 58 active wildfires in the province. A Manitoba columnist has written a book on Indigenous people called Treaties, Lies and Promises: How the Métis and First Nations Shaped Canada. For more than a decade, Tom Broadbeck wrote about Indigenous issues, but his opinions often upset Indigenous communities. At one point, chiefs in Manitoba accused him of racist thinking and asked for a boycott of the media organization he worked for. He's never spoken to APTN about his columns until now. T.R. Wheatley did a one-on-one interview with Broadbeck in Upper Fort Garry, an iconic place for the Métis Nation and a place he writes about in his upcoming book.
Thank you for being here with me. Can you just introduce yourself and what it is you do?
Sure, my name's Tom Broadbeck, and I'm a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press, and I've been a journalist for 30 years in Winnipeg.
So you're writing a book. Tell me a little bit about your book.
So the book is called Treaties, Lies and Promises, and it's a book about the contribution Indigenous people made to Manitoba and Canada, in particular Manitoba's entry into Canada. But it's also a book about how Indigenous people have been marginalized and excluded and dehumanized in many cases, and it gets into the stories that surround colonial governments and colonial settlers. And I don't think you can understand where we're at today for many complex issues without understanding those stories and knowing those stories. You don't have to be an expert on the Red River Resistance or the numbered treaties, but I think if you want to really understand where we're at as a province and a country, you really need to have a sense of what those stories were all about.
The underlying issue here people want to know is why you to write this, considering your background and some of the columns you've wrote about my people in the past.
I wrote an apology column in the Free Press a couple of weeks ago after I was called out on social media about some of the columns I wrote 10 years ago when I worked at the Winnipeg Sun. I'm ashamed of those columns that I wrote. When I read them today, I'm embarrassed by them. I've changed my views after educating myself and learning more and talking to Indigenous people.
I mean, many people called you a racist. Would you consider yourself?
I don't, no, and I don't think I ever have been, but I drew wrong conclusions about issues such as missing and murdered Indigenous women inquiry, issues such as Gladue reports in court where the courts are being asked to consider the historical background of Indigenous offenders when sentencing. I drew wrong conclusions when the Canadian Museum of Human Rights offered Indigenous people free admission. And my conclusion was that people should never be treated differently based on their race, including Indigenous people who form a unique group of people within Canada. And I was wrong in that conclusion. And it was based on ignorance.
What's that pivotal point? I mean, you can't just go from calling out Indigenous people time and time and time again, and then just suddenly, hey, you know, I'm your ally now.
I accept that criticism. It's completely valid. You know, I don't think there was any one pivotal moment. There's been a journey that I've been on for the last 5 to 10 years that has slowly transformed my thoughts and my beliefs.
Do you ever think about your words and how they could have spewed hate in other people who already had it? Example, you know, we're in this city where they call it ground zero for missing and murdered Indigenous women. I mean, like, I could think of Sean Lamb, the recent Skibitsky. Like, they could have been using your words to fuel themselves. Do you ever think about that?
I do now. I didn't at the time, but I recognize now that those words and those columns fueled racist sentiment and gave people a license to think that way and to behave that way. That's part of the harm that I caused.
Any of the Indigenous community, have anybody kind of like helped you along the way with this book? Like kind of endorsing you and encouraging you?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Chief wrote the foreword for my book, and we've been friends for a long time and developed a relationship, and I've learned a ton from him, and we talk all the time, and he enlightens me on many things. I've been speaking with the MMF, the Manitoba Métis Federation. They're reading an advanced copy of the book, and I've talked to them a lot about these issues as well.
Have you reached out to, I could think of a few, Terry Nelson, who at the time when you worked at the Winnipeg son, as well as Chief Derek Neepanat, who were asking for a boycott of this this media place that you worked at because of your words.
Yeah. I haven't, but I would like to. I would like to keep reaching out. Yeah.
As somebody who likes words and stuff, it was definitely well worded, your apology. It almost reminded me though of the 2008 apology from Stephen Harper, where it was very like rehearsed, kind of like saying you're sorry but you're not sorry.
It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't. It was genuine. It's emotional. It's very emotional for me. And all I can say is people can change their minds. People can be wrong, and it's okay to admit you were wrong. And I'm admitting that I'm wrong. I'm admitting I was wrong.
Thank you, TR. Join us again tomorrow night for part 2 of that interview between TR and Mr. Broadbeck. You'll find out more about that book, when it will be available to the public, and where he plans to donate some of the earnings. The Manitoba Métis Federation is celebrating this week after putting more Métis families into homes. We'll tell you more when we're back in about 3 minutes. Stick around. Welcome back. The Manitoba Métis Federation is celebrating a big milestone in their first-time home purchase program. 1,000 families have now purchased their own homes with the financial help of the MMF. The celebration took place on the lawn of one of the 1,000th home purchased through the program. Since launching in 2019, the MMF has provided forgivable loans to Red River Métis families in Manitoba in conjunction with the Louis Riel Capital Corporation. The loans cover up to $18,000 towards a down payment and up to $2,500 for closing costs. The loan is forgiven if owners live at the property for at least 10 years. The MMF says the program has put more than $250 million into Manitoba's economy and created almost 460 jobs in the last 5 years.
There's 1,000 families in homes today who would have been renting or would have been living elsewhere today. They are building equity in their families. They have a safe place for their kids. They have a warm place for their kids to live. We know that education, job opportunities come when you feel safe and secure in a place that you live. And that's what these 1,000 homes symbolize, 1,000 families. That's what it symbolizes to me.
As we reported earlier in the week, Braden Bushby, the Thunder Bay man charged with manslaughter in the death of Barbara Kentner, is back behind bars. Bushby was granted parole in August of 2023, but violated the conditions of his parole over the past year. For more on this, our Truth in Politics panel is here. Jennifer Leywitz is a partner with Pasqua Harbor Strategies, and Nigon Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, let's start with you. Bushby was serving an 8-year manslaughter sentence for his role in the death of Barbara Kentner after he threw a metal trailer hitch at her from a moving vehicle. Were you surprised he was granted parole last year?
I want to say that I was surprised, but with the devaluing of Indigenous women's lives, I'm really not all that surprised, paired with, our justice system that seems to be devaluing of our women's lives as well. And it's really unfortunate that he was granted parole so quickly, and seeing his actions right after getting granted on parole and breaking his parole conditions with drinking and getting tattoos that have some pretty problematic underlying issues behind them really tells me that he didn't even learn anything while he did spend a very little amount of time in prison.
Nigon, this was a very high profile case. What do you think it says that he was granted parole so early into his sentence?
It just says exactly what Jennifer points out, which is that if this had been, let's say, a wealthy, non-Indigenous person who was high profile or known for instance, in the community publicly, this would be somebody who would be certainly in jail for a lot longer. There would be a much bigger outcry that people would worry about when releasing someone like this into the public. And not only that, but there would also be much more stronger stringencies put into place to make sure that they were kept in the roll line with their parole restrictions. I mean, this was really just a fluke that Bushby was caught. It was in allegedly a motor vehicle incident in which a breathalyzer proved that he was consuming alcohol, breaking his parole. So the fact is, it was kind of just a fluke that this was caught. And on top of that, on the recommendation of his parole officer that he would be sent back to prison, the question is really, without all of the different attention that we as Indigenous media, other people within the community on social media are paying for this person who did this horrible, horrible crime, would there have been something done? And my answer would be likely not.
Jennifer, Bushby violated a number of his conditions during his release, but the parole board decision to put him back in prison mentions on a number of occasions a tattoo of a Confederate flag, which you mentioned there, that Bushby got on his chest while on parole, something Bushby says he didn't realize until it was done. What do you think of getting that tattoo, given its history and its associations?
I think this is definitely where critical thinking comes in. And I know there's a lot of people out there, I live in Saskatchewan, where sometimes you see those flags that are flown. And I think not understanding the dark history behind the evolution of those flags, especially as it pertains to the United States and everything like that. And honestly, I'm going to be frank, I don't believe him. I don't think that most people go in and get tattoos like that without understanding what it is that they're getting tattooed on their body. And what concerns me is the connection there between somebody non-Indigenous committing such a heinous crime against an Indigenous woman, spending very little time in prison where you are supposed to be rehabilitated, getting let out fairly soon, and just continuing on to do things that are very, very questionable not only what does that tell us about how that individual views the crime that he committed, but also people that are watching this from the outside in. How does that protect our women and protect our Indigenous people across the country when our justice system is basically telling everyone out loud that there's a very little amount of value placed on our lives?
Niigaan, Bushby is eligible to apply for parole again next summer. Does Bushby deserve another shot at being released?
There was a report that was entered into evidence suggesting that Bushby has no history or no evidence of hatred towards Indigenous peoples. That tells me that there are a number of people complicit within the system that are clearly just not listening and not watching to see what a person does. Sometimes it's what you do as much as what you say or don't say. And evidence of this tattoo is showing that this person is festering or flirting with supremacist beliefs that have at times supported the hatred of racialized people, particularly African Americans, but I think not so far off Native Americans, Indigenous peoples like ourselves. And so the system is really failing on this story particularly, and we can really see the justice system in Canada, and particularly in Northwestern Ontario, as being complicit with a person who is clearly showing signs, red flags of hatred of Indigenous peoples, not just in the egregious action of the crime that he committed, but is that it's ongoing and that it's not changing. And so the system is not assisting this person to then eradicate their racist beliefs. And I think that's a condemnation on everyone, not just the individual who's involved, but also that the entire system and everybody involved in that system and Canadians.
Niigaan and Jennifer, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your time. We'll see you again next week.
Yeah, me actually. Thanks.
After 3 seasons, the hit series Reservation Dogs is finally getting some Emmy nods. We'll also tell you which actor could possibly take home an Emmy. We're back in less than 3 minutes. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. The West Coast is known for its scenic mountain and ocean views, but did you know you can also see the remnants of volcanic activity? Charity Peel shared this photo of the lava beds in Noss Valley, located in the home of the Nisga'a Nation. Thank you for that, Charity. Email your photos to share@aptn.ca and you could be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Over to the east, St. John's 26, Charlottetown 28. Nain 10, Nujuak 13. Val-d'Or 31, Gasp 30. Sarnia 25, Ottawa 30. Timmins 31, Sioux Lookout 27. Churchill 10, Norway House 25. Winnipeg 29, Barons River 27. Regina a hot 36 and Saskatoon 32. La Ronge 24, Stony Rapids 19. Northern AB, Fort Chipewyan 20, Peace River 24. Lethbridge 33, Edmonton 26. Bella Coola 30, Kamloops 35. Smithers 26, Fort Nelson 25. Old Crow 18, Watson Lake 21. Yellowknife 19, Norman Wells 21. Colville Lake 18, Sax Harbor 7. 14 in Baker Lake, 12 in Chesterfield. Igloolik 6 and 6 in Arctic Bay. Next week is the annual Saskatoon exhibition in Saskatchewan. Last year, the X brought in over 200,000 guests. This year, one of the highlight attractions is an event dedicated to showcasing Indigenous culture through clothing. The Gabriel Dumont Institute is bringing ribbon skirts to the city's biggest summer event. From August 6th to the 11th, visitors can visit the exhibition grounds to admire seamstresses' work from across the province. The exhibit honors Métis and First Nations women by showcasing the craft of ribbon skirts. All skirts were submitted by volunteers, but artisans who contributed were entered to win one of 5 $100 gift certificates. After 3 seasons and 28 episodes, the comedy series Reservation Dogs, which airs on Disney+, Hulu and Star, finally received some recognition as it has been nominated for 5 Emmys this year. The nominations include Best Comedy Series, Best Cinematography for a Single Camera Series, Best Sound Editing, and Best Picture Editing. DeFaro Wunatai, the actor who plays Bear Smallhill, also got an Outstanding Lead Actor nomination in a comedy series. Co-creator and showrunner Sterling Harjo is from the Seminole Nation in Oklahoma. He says the show has never been nominated for an Emmy before, and he was surprised when it was. Harjo says people crave new and different stories, and he hopes Hollywood will see that moving forward. The Emmy Award ceremony will be on September 15th.
Why am I here? How do you even go to California?
And that's your evening APTN National Newscast for this Thursday, August 1st. We'll be back again tomorrow for your midday newscast. From everyone here at our Winnipeg HQ and from our reporters from across the country, hi, miigwech, masicho. Thank you for watching.